So my name's David Bushman.
And I'm Scott Ryan.
I just published a book called Conversations with Mark Frost, who co-created Twin Peaks.
And I'm also the managing editor of the Blue Rose magazine, which covers Twin Peaks.
I'm co-president, co-founder, and co-publisher of a small indie press called Fayetteville Mafia Press. And the topic that we're addressing today is the five greatest, or in our opinion, our very subjective opinions, the five greatest science fiction television shows of all time.
What is your number 5 show?
So my fifth show is Lost, which clearly did involve elements of science fiction, including time travel and Mysterious Black Monster. I thought it was just so incredibly compelling from both a personality or personal character viewpoint and from an idea or intellectual viewpoint, and that would be why it was number 5. I think it was one of the greatest shows of all time, and I love the ending.
My number 5 pick is from 1967, and it's The Prisoner. This right now is streaming on Amazon Prime, and if you are stuck in your house, there's no better show right now to be watching than The Prisoner. I mean, there's so much to look at. It's definitely old, and the pacing is rough. I don't know that the pacing made it to 2020, but all of the hidden things and the be seeing you, and it's just so much about what we're living in now that I really felt this had to be on the list.
Number 4 show was the X-Files, and again, the X-Files was, roughly speaking, 50% science fiction and 50% horror, depending on what the episode was. But the core mythology was all science fiction, with the aliens abducting his sister and colonizing Earth and collaborating with this cabal of privileged white men, and the whole idea of the powerful and the privileged and the wealthy looking out for their own interests at the expense of the rest of humankind is an incredibly relevant theme then, today, and always.
My number 4 pick is The X-Files. So look at that. We're right on schedule. And, you know, one of the things that you didn't highlight was Scully's role in the history of sci-fi. I think that you could certainly make the case that she is the greatest female television sci-fi character because of what she represented. You know, they gave her the scientific background, which was certainly a new thing and unheard of in '93.
Number 3 is a show that I'm willing to bet everything on that is not on your list, and that's Terminator: The Sarah Connor Chronicles. So this is obviously the TV version of the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. And Lena Headey, who went on to play Cersei in Game of Thrones, is Sarah Connor. And Summer Glau, who the great geek pinup girl from Firefly, is the Terminator in the Arnold Schwarzenegger role. But and you know, Lena Headey was amazing. But what I loved about this show, there's so much that I loved about this show, but what I loved about it was the way it evolved. And this is true of great shows like Fringe is another one which is not on my list, but the writers, you could tell that they never got lazy because they would keep reinventing the show. Now, the Sarah Connor Chronicles wasn't on that long. It was on for 2 seasons, but it was another one where they kept reinventing it.
Number 3 for me is Battlestar Galactica, the 2004 version by Ronald D. Moore and David Icke. This is a show similar to Buffy that I wish it had a different name. There's been so many times I've told people, you really have to watch Battlestar Galactica, and they're like, Battlestar Galactica? I mean, it's one of those things where sci-fi, you know, if you're a sci-fi person, you don't mind watching a show called that. But if you're someone who thinks The Sopranos or Breaking Bad, shows like that are where television quality is at, you're going to ignore Galactica. You're making a huge mistake. I would submit that season 1 of Battlestar Galactica, which I'm counting as being the mini-series and that first season, no sci-fi show has a stronger beginning than Battlestar.
Second on my list is Doctor Who. I mean, this is a tough show, a very tough show to judge in this context because, first of all, are we talking about post-reboot, which is 2005 and Christopher Eccleston? Are we going back to 1963 when the show aired? But even if we're talking about, Eccleston, Tennant, Smith, Capaldi, there's been 5 doctors and how many companions? And the quality of that show really does waver. So, in my opinion. So there are episodes of Doctor Who that I think, like the Doctor Dances, I think what the one is called, with Christopher Eccleston, and I think John Barrowman is in that, and Rose Tyler, or some of those Amy Pond episodes. I think Amy Pond is like an amazing character, but some of those episodes I would consider the greatest episodes ever made for TV. But then take, for example, the whole first season with Jodie Whittaker. I thought I was watching Star Trek from the 1960s, which is not meant as a compliment. So
I'm just going to say I have that as my number 1. So it saves us time later. And the reason I agree with you that there are ups and downs, even within great seasons, but I don't know that you can judge it on that. To me, if you think of what holds back American television, it's this idea that if David Caruso leaves NYPD Blue, it's going to crumble. And, so much television is based on these stars saying, I'm the star. And here's a show that says, no, we have set it up that we don't care if you leave. The TARDIS is the star of the show. A guy in the UK is the one that got me to watch this show. And what he said to me is, as a little kid, when his doctor left, and he loved that doctor, and then the new doctor came, and he liked that doctor too, that he learned that life is change. And through life, that's been something that has taught him that. And I think how interesting that in America, we think, no, I like that, and that's all I like, and I'll never change.
I understand the message of the evolution and how it's worked for Doctor Who, but for me, that show hasn't. And I feel although I did think the second season of Jodie Whittaker was really good, but for me, that show hasn't been the same since
Stephen Moffat. I was supposed to give my number 2.
Yes.
Which we ended up talking about Doctor Who. But my number 2 is Star Trek The Next Generation. I never thought that I would put another show over Star Trek The Next Generation. And the fact that Doctor Who has overtaken it is really incredible. The Next Generation is what brought me to the world of Star Trek. I mean, I had seen Kirk as a kid, but I didn't really get into it till I cared about Picard and his crew. But The Next Generation is about morals. It's about doing what's right. It teaches you a lesson. It's about leadership. And I haven't watched The Next Generation in 10 years. But my guess is if I watched that show today, it would break me, because all of that is gone from our society. Like, just gone. I mean, who cares about lessons, morals, and leadership?
My number 1 choice is probably the darkest show on this list, and that's Battlestar Galactica, which is where, again, I think there are such interesting moral and ethical issues being raised in Battlestar Galactica that are so provocatively dealt with, so shaded, but the characters are people you really get to know and really care about. I mean, I think everything about that show is just absolutely stunning. So those are our choices for the 5 greatest, or our 5 greatest science fiction TV shows of all time. It was a terribly difficult assignment because there are so many shows that could be on this list that aren't. But now we want to hear from you. Why don't you tell us what we did right and what we did wrong?